Joining us now, Congressman, 1st District Republican, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Sea Power Readiness, Congressman Rob Wittman. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir.
John, it's great to be back with you this morning.
Always a pleasure. Tax bill, where do we stand?
Well, I think that there are a few fine-tuning moments going on with the tax bill, so I'm confident that it'll be back before both the House and the Senate next week, probably by Tuesday. As always, with last-minute negotiations and a conference report, there's a little bit of back and forth, but I am confident that they will get those elements worked out. I think there's much agreement on some of the things that have been brought up by Senator Rubio and Senator Lee. So it's not anything that creates an impasse. It's just a matter of where the numbers end up for the child tax credit. And it's a good discussion to have. We want to make sure that we get this right. It's good that Senator Lee and Senator Rubio have brought this up and said, hey, listen, this is where it started originally. This is where they negotiated to in the Senate. And when the number falls below both the House and the Senate number, it's not a bad thing to have that discussion. I understand that the number's moving back north again, closer to where Senator Rubio would like it and closer to where the House number is. So I think all those things are positive developments, and I think ultimately that the conference committee finishes their report, gets it to both bodies to be voted on by next week so it can be on the president's desk before Christmas.
Well, it's my understanding that it is likely that the actual final bill is posted over the weekend, either tonight late or Saturday. Is that your understanding, Congressman?
That's my understanding too, John, is that they're working through today the final numbers. And as you know, they want to make sure all those add up because there is a ceiling as to what it can be projected is the cost of the bill, and they want to make sure that they get those numbers right. So it is my understanding that it'll be posted at least by early this evening or first thing tomorrow morning, which is the conference report, so that members can take a look at that, and then it'll be on our radar screen to vote the first of next week.
Congressman Wittman, can you walk our audience through very quickly, because I just want to be sure I explain it the right way, Senator Rubio's beef here, which on paper I agree with. He wants to extend the child tax credit, which is going to be $2,000. He wants to extend that to a refundable situation for those that, as a result of that, would have no tax liability, so that it would be refundable against their payroll withholding. Can you explain that in layman's terms for us?
Sure. Well, essentially, John, John, to put it in simple terms, the House bill had the tax credit for children at $1,600 per child, and the Senate bill, Senator Rubio negotiated it to $2,000 per child, and the conference committee had it at $1,100 per child. But as you said, it was something where you had to wait until you filed your taxes in order to get that particular dollar amount taken off of your taxable income. So what Senator Rubio in the Senate version had said is not only to make it a higher amount, but also, as you said, to make it refundable, so that for lower income families that need these dollars now, it's not that they can wait until the end of the year in order to file their tax returns to get the dollars. It's important for them to have it now. That's a provision that he had negotiated in the Senate bill and wanted it to be reflected in the conference report. So it's not only a difference in what the child tax credit would be, but it's, as you said, how that child tax credit would actually be manifested in dollars in the hands of those lower income families.
So how does $1,600 from the House and $2,000 from the Senate under 17 child tax credit, how does that get negotiated down to $1,100? How does that? I mean, if you split the difference, it would be $1,800. Why did it go down by $900?
I think with that, and again, John, not being on the conference committee, trying to project what this is, it's a measure of all the different combinations of things. As you know, there have been some changes in the rates, changes in what's allowed in deductions. As you know, there's a lot of back and forth about the state and local tax deductions. The understanding in the conference report is that they've expanded that. So for these states where property tax and income taxes are higher, There's a lot of back and forth with members from those states. So this really all becomes a mathematical formula about what the total amount of deductions are and what the impacts will be for all these families. So, I can't speak to the specifics of that, why it went to 1,100. And I do agree with Senator Lee and Senator Rubio that it has to be closer to the House and the Senate number, or somewhere in between, than it does the lower number. So I'm not exactly sure how the math added up there with obviously what they made changes elsewhere. And normally what happens in these rates and these deductions is it gets offset somewhere else. So this is, part of the machinations of going back and forth. And that is my understanding of what the differences were with that. So again, it may be different because the conferees, have not, really put out there. It's my understanding from Senator Rubio that was his concern with it, were the actual dollar amounts, and that he couldn't support it because the dollar amounts there were not anywhere close to what he negotiated as part of the Senate group that put together the Senate plan.
Well, look, I just got to be honest with you. I never even really considered that 1,100 would be in the final bill because it's such a departure from the whole debate that we've had. And if you start running the numbers and you take that $900 out, then it's crap. That $2,000 a person is what made it work for middle class Americans. So, look, we don't have.
I couldn't agree more, John. To me, it makes more sense to have it, as you said, somewhere between the House and the Senate number. Certainly, if the $1,100 level is correct in what's reflected in the conference report, I think Senator Rubio and Senator Lee are absolutely correct in saying no, that's not an acceptable place to be. And again, not having the actual conference report in front of us, only going on what I understand is being projected by others, that's my understanding of where the differences are. And as you said, the refundability of that and how those dollars actually get into the hands of those families, and that was something that was negotiated in the Senate version. But it makes perfect sense to me to say, hey, listen, we ought to get closer to the numbers that were in the House and Senate report, not being that far south of that. And I was the same way. I was questioning why that far below the numbers that came out of the House and Senate bills. So I think it's correct to call that into question and say, wait a minute. Let's make sure
it's beyond that. The $2,000. Even the $1,600, the math didn't work. The $2,000, that is the cornerstone of making this a middle class tax cut. You drop that to $1,100, and there's no tax cut for the majority of people. And then the Democrats aren't lying; then they're telling you the truth. So, I agree. That's what this is focused on, and especially for working class families, John. That's what this is about. This is for working class families, and I couldn't agree more that the child tax credit is the foundational aspect of this bill. So I think Senator Lee and Senator Rubio are correct in the issues that they make with this. Let me just read a text here that I got from Leslie in Virginia Beach. She says, if the final plan has a number that is below the Senate or the House plan, then that is bait and switch. Then I will never vote for another Republican in the rest of my life. The stakes here, man, are high, because that would be bait and switch, wouldn't it? That would be like you're selling something and then the swamp creatures come in and change it at the end. Look, we're going to not debate this now because we don't know what the final plan is going to be. But I've got another text here from Anita in Portsmouth who says the 2,000 child tax credit is the only thing in the plan that makes it work for middle-class Americans like me. Then, the other question here is, Congressman Wittman, which is real for Republicans, is, the president campaigned against the hedge fund loophole, right? That's people that make, millions of dollars managing money. They produce nothing. They don't risk any of their own money. They make $200, $300, $400, $500 million. And then instead of paying income tax like everybody else, they get to pay the lower 20% capital gains tax. So the president campaigned against that. The swamp put that back in for their donors. And then we got the top rate going from 39 to 37. Nobody's asking for that. If you're making $1 million, and you have to pay another $20,000 in tax, too bad. This is going from a middle class tax cut now to something that it was not presented to be. Hopefully you guys will get this worked out.
Yeah, we have to, and I agree with those observations, John. To me, the 39% rate for top earners for me was not an issue, and I didn't hear from a single top earner that says, hey, we want that rate to go down. So I agree for at least for myself. I can't speak for others, but for myself, that was a non-issue.
This swamp has come out. Look, these are the donors that have the lobbyists that go in there and change this in order to benefit them. But look, you know what? We're not going to dwell on it because we don't know what the final bill is going to be that comes out of the committee. So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. Let's go to Robert Muller, Congressman. You have seniority. You're in leadership. Should any action be taken against Mueller and this investigation? Do you think it's honest and authentic, or are you starting to question the integrity of it?
Well, John, I do have some concerns about the biases of some of the folks on Mueller's team, especially this Peter Strzok, and obviously the text that we've seen. He's gone back and forth. Obviously, a clear bias there. Now, I give Mr. Mueller credit in that he took him off. There is transparency, at least in these texts that are going back and forth. But I think it does demand that we, that is legislators, look at this and say, is this bias creeping into how this evaluation of the accusations of collusion with President Trump, is it affecting that investigation? That, I think, is the fundamental element. I do think that the Justice Department needs to look at that. As you saw, Rod Rosenstein the other day came and testified. I think that there are some questions there, too. And I want to be clear that we have to be very careful about not casting aspersions on everybody in the FBI. I can tell you, I have a lot of FBI agents and folks that live in the 1st Congressional District. I think the vast majority of them are extraordinary individuals that do a great job. But, whenever there is a bad apple in the bunch, we need to make sure, too, that we look at that and hold those individuals accountable, because if we don't, then it does harm to all the other individuals that are doing the great work there. So I think we need to do that. The Justice Department really is at the center of looking at this and making sure that this bias doesn't creep into what's happening with the Mueller investigation. And to me, that's the key, as well as Congress. Congress has a role here to make sure that there's transparency here, that people understand that, and that we are confident that bias isn't creeping in. I can tell you that the more things that we see coming in here with the Comey report, as we've seen from the FBI, and what appears to be at least potential bias that crept into that well before that report was finalized, and all those things do, I think, create questions in the public's mind. And remember, if our system of laws are to work, whether it's through the investigations or through the prosecutions or through the total process between the FBI and the Justice Department, it's all based on trust. And we have to be able to trust those individuals. If that trust is violated, then the whole foundation of our system gets called into question. And if the public loses trust there, then that, I think, is problematic. And I think that's at the center of what must happen with this. We must look at this and say, how have these biases been manifested? Have they resulted in decisions that have been made that are not fair or that are indeed biased? And if they are, then actions need to be taken, whether it's through the Justice Department or whether it's through congressional action. That's incumbent upon us to make sure that people can trust in our system of laws.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just see this investigation with Mueller, Congressman, and I've only got a half a minute. The siege is going on in perpetuity. I mean, there's nothing on collusion. There's nothing that has anything to do with why he was appointed by Rothenstein, who's enamored by the New York Times saying good things about him. I mean, does it just investigate now Jared Kushner's businesses, Ivanka's perfumes? Does this just go on now? And when's it end?
No, John, I think with everything that we've seen laid out in front of us, I can't imagine there being much left for him to look at. Now, obviously, all those other elements are not part of the original investigation on Russian collusion, which is what this is supposed to be about. My thought, and of course I have no idea when it's going to end, but my thought is that it should conclude by the early part of next year. When I say early part, January, February of next year. Now, that doesn't mean that's when it's going to end. That's my supposition of when it should end based on the actions and the time that Mr. Muller's had in this special counsel effort.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Congressman Rob Wittman for being with us. More information, wittman.house.gov. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you.